Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning and welcome back to my course on partition literature. So, today we are going to talk more about history and alternative memory writings. We are going to focus on the role that fiction plays in complementing history, the events of history, and we are referring to partition here, the partition of India in 1947. So, we see how there is an inherent oscillation in the partition literary texts, where we are looking at the crisis of death and also the crisis of life and survival. So, we are not only talking about the nature of the event, but how that event is survived in the collective memory, the difficulties in remembering. The structuralist and the post-structuralist schools are interested in the stylistic devices, the stylistic markers in an artwork by which meaning is produced. By the time we start talking about deconstruction and the postmodern, there is a destruction of meaning. There is a kind of rupture through which meaning cannot be produced anymore. We look at an event, a cataclysm such as partition through the deconstructionist and the postmodern point of view. The claim of language actually fails. Language cannot adequately refer to the world. In fact, it fails in referring to anything at all. So, there is a kind of gap between the historical reality and how it is represented through language. So, it harkens back what Paul de Man would say, that linguistically oriented theories do not deny a reference necessarily, but the theories actually function on a different plane from that of the natural law. So, there is a denial of possibility of or modeling the principles of reference based on the natural law. The world of language sometimes cannot capture the historical reality or the trauma wrought by history in its entirety. In that context, in the light of that, cinema becomes very important. It is a popular media and it represents the emotion, the sentiment of the masses. Bhaskar Sarkar would say that cinema provides a powerful and captivating means of cultural memorialization through bringing together the fragments and reassembling the past through considerable acts of reimagination. So, reimaging and reimagination actually goes into the making of visual artworks such as film. This form of culture entails, beyond a simple recovery of the past, the creative revivification of an archive of inner data and fragmentary evidence. So, revivifying, reliving the inert data, the under-researched areas becomes an important project for cinema that cinema tends to pursue. So, the genre of film facilitates a mobility of narrative. Narrative journeys of psychic splitting and reintegration is considered when we are talking about a genre such as cinema. So, we have already discussed about the two modes of representation, one is the fictional, the other is the testimonial, and critics would go on to say that the fiction has a greater degree of freedom, it can recreate. Fiction is better placed to contextualize and re-examine the political uncertainties that have produced it, because a testimony has its limit. The person that has witnessed is also in a way a trauma survivor. So, we understand that grammar, the semantics for recounting the past in a way is limited, but imagination using the creative field is a way of liberating the incident from its exact spatio-temporal coordinates, and through the artist's intervention certain new possibilities are actually established. Certain unconventional alternative possibilities are explored by fiction. So, film helps in confronting trauma by a collective mourning in a public space such as theatre. So, a shared experience of mourning, a shared experience of recollection and purgation is something that informs the genre of cinema. So, we have many of these films such as Lahore, which depicts the plight of Radha and Neela, these two women that have been abducted by Muslim men during the partition, and also a very important work by M.S. Satyu is Garam Hawa. Garam Hawa is trying to look at the dilemma of the minority community, in this case the Muslims, and the decision that they need to make whether to stay back in an India that proclaims secular values, or to migrate to the newly born Islamic nation state Pakistan. So, the frustrations or the limitations that the family, this Muslim patriarch called Salim Mirza faces as a shoe manufacturer from Agra is vividly discussed and portrayed by Satyu in Garam Hawa. So, we understand that the literary representation or the artistic representation actually comes in as a way of depicting the liminal. In other words, I mean, whenever we are trying to have a total picture, there is always the scope of not talking about something else, and literary scholarship, partition scholarship actually is intended on extending the fields and understanding this experience through looking at different coordinates, looking at the differentials of experience, different ways of existence at the time and after the partition. A section of Dalit refugees that were adolescent, that were young at the time when partition happened, and who subsequently grew up, they acquired literacy and they start writing, and most of these writers are males. So, in their autobiography they speak up about the violence that males, the Dalit males also face, bodily violence, besides socioeconomic and cultural subjugation. There are testimonies of bodily violence. So, young boys, Dalit boys who were refugees got raped by the state actors such as the police. They write about their experience in the prison, and they are definitely gruesome. So, we need to understand these intersectionalities where new meanings are actually churned out of identities lying at the crossroads of caste, class, gender against the backdrop of partition. So, we have very important work by Kavita Daya, who actually tells us that gendered form of violence at the time of or in the context of partition does not only center the woman. We also need to look at the sexualized and the violated Dalit male's body, especially the vulnerable young Dalit population among the refugees. So, and then we have the picture, the image of the train coming back again and again, be it Khushwant Singh's novel Train to Pakistan, or Peshawar Express by Kishan Chandar, or The Train Has Reached Amritsar by Vishnu Sahani, and then we have Ghatak's films The Cloud Capped Star and The Golden Line. So, this journey in a train or the failure thereof, the journey that never happens, keeps coming back. Journey to a place of no return. So, the host land becomes a place from where there is no return to home. And like I was saying the other day, there is a split, there is a fundamental split between one's belonging to a nation and one's belonging to the home. So, the train signifies a train of memories, a train of nostalgia, and ultimately a dead end for all hopes. The gruesome, the grisly image of the train bringing corpses across the border. So, trains being sent that are loaded with dead bodies, mutilated bodies. And so, trains actually in Peshawar Express, we see it is the autobiography of a train. The train is the narrator, the train witnesses the violence, murder, rape, rampant killing, and so the train in the end is stationed in Bombay, and it says that I would never again like to go on a journey across the border. I would only travel when things are better, there is communal harmony, and we can understand journey, transportation, or moving from one place to another, not in terms of loss, chaos, or tragedy, but in terms of development, business, prosperity, and so basically meaningful exchange. So, what is witnessed is not trauma exactly, but the impossibility to gather a kind of meaning. It is the impossibility to have an assembled presence of the trauma, and fiction actually develops within this impossibility in recognition of the inherent failure of language, and hence the role of the imagination, the faculty of imagination in extrapolating what the reality. Imagination complements and takes forward the handicap that reality at the time of partition in a way faced. Partition in a way can be represented only through intermingling of reality with imagination. So, there are works like Train to Pakistan, and then Bapsi Sidhwa's Cracking India, which actually open up the literary space, and fiction has this potential to become testimony. In Sidhwa's Cracking India, we look at this protagonist called Lenny. She has a polio-stricken leg, so she is a specially able child, and it is a coming of age film. From the pristinity of childhood, she is growing up and learning the ways of the adult world. She is learning about adult things such as religion, communal disharmony and male female physicality. She talks about rape, and she is growing up in such a disturbed time that she and her cousin, who is almost her age, actually reenact rape on their doll, or on a rag doll. Actually they are performing rape on a toy. So these discussions have actually reached the children. The violence has been normalized and they have seeped into the juvenile psyche, right. So these are very powerful representations by by different artworks that we see. And then we see Satish Gujral's expression of the pathos of partition through his paintings, where the anguish of the men and the women who are in the throes of ruination is portrayed very effectively and very powerfully. So the role of literature, of artworks, basically complementing formal history writing. So Kamlesh Mohan deals with a story based on Kashmiri Lal Zakir's novel. Kamar Ranwali is talking about women and their psychic journey. I mean a generation of women that had to migrate across the border and had to leave their children behind. So it is based on the real incident of a woman looking for her lost son. So and in the process of this search, she discovers the dehumanizing conditions of a refugee camp. So these are the blind spots or the areas, the aporias, if we may, in official historiography. Similarly, we look at Amrita Pritam's novel Pinjar, literally meaning skeleton. So the plight of the woman, and once again her liminal position. She is dealing with a fragmented identity, and at the same time her identity has several overlaps. So the woman's body becomes a site of overlapping spatio-temporal meanings. So different communal orders, different patriarchal orders are etched, are engraved on this body of the woman, and she is living the life existence inside a cage. So it foregrounds the question of family and community honor and elision of women's rights as their citizenship, their rights as a citizen are undermined through patriarchal notions of communal ownership of women's bodies in the newly independent nations. So, and so we in Amitav Ghosh's shadow lines, we look at the long shadow of partition continuing in through multiple moments of violence. And so Amitav Ghosh talks about the riots in Calcutta that took place in 1964. There is a point where the grandmother wants to travel back to her homeland, which is now in Bangladesh, and she is interested in seeing the border, and she sees none, and she is visibly disappointed. She thought that there is a physical border separating the two nation states, India and Bangladesh, or the East Pakistan. So she says, where is the border? And that's the failure of nation building project. Border, I mean, cuts across the Radcliffe lines, the madness in making, in map making, in the formation of cartography. In Begum Jan, we see that the line actually cuts through a brothel. Most of these prostitutes are rape victims that have not been taken back by their families, so they take up prostitution. And the brothel is their home. So it's another kind of meaning that we are exploring when we talk about a home being partitioned. So for the brothel mistress, the home is the desh. The question of desh is, I mean, it's a ramified meaning. It has so many different significations depending where the person is coming from, or you know, the social allocation, the caste class allocation of the person. For a brothel owner, the kotha is actually their home, and the Radcliffe line cuts across that. Having to leave the brothel, it tantamounts having to leave one's desh. They are actually far away from the protagonists of the nation building process, Nehru, Gandhi, Jinnah. So Delhi is far away from them. The Delhi politics, mainstream politics, is far away from them. They do not understand that. For them, the brothel is the desh, which is at stake, which is getting partitioned. So, Gayatri Spivak says that procedure of fiction can give us a simulacrum of the discontinuities inhabiting and operating the ethico-epistemic and the ethico-political. So, the genre of partition literature explores these gaps, where fiction takes the liberty, the poetic license to universalize the particular and particularize the universal. So, we have already spoken about Manto's stories, Manto's short stories like Toba Tek Singh, Titwal Ka Kutta, Kholdo, Thanda Gosht, and Kali Shalwar, A Tale of 1947, Ram Khilavan, and so forth. So, they are all looking at the moral complexities of humans and the capacities, the bestial capacities of the ordinary man. So, the person that was just an onlooker could at the next moment become a murderer. So, this line between being good, between civil behavior and becoming a perpetrator, this line is very kind of blurred and almost not there. This vulnerability of human at the time of partition is very richly you know, depicted. TV series such as Visham Sahani's Tamas. So, a family friend from a different community can suddenly turn into a murderer without a guilt, without any qualms. Manto is delving into deeply into the psyche of the apparently ordinary individuals who are capable of extraordinary violence in the throes of a cataclysm. His protagonists are testament to his belief that human depravity can never succeed in killing all sense of humanity. So, his faith lay in that kind of humanity. Literature is important, or artworks are important in looking at different dimensions of human character. So, on the one hand, while we are talking about enmity, there are also instances of extraordinary human courage, you know, display of compassion, where humanity actually survives over and above anything else. So, there are all these different kinds of narratives of partition. Love at the time of partition, love across border, love that defies communal. We have a film called Gadar Ek Prem Katha, that is or Veer Zara. We are making films on partition even at the turn of the century. It is still a much discussed and a relevant topic that keeps coming back even in Bollywood films. So, Nandi Bhatia would say that literary works qualify as an alternative source of history. Kartar Singh Duggal's Abducted Not is a work where we see the establishment of the ordnance factory in the village. So, and this is the village is a, generally speaking, it's a localized, it's a remote existence away from urban politics, and yet the sirens of a factory are symbolic of the deterioration and devastation caused, you know, by this communal riots. So, the factory becomes an institution set up in the village, where we understand that slowly and gradually the rural, almost seen as an idyllic place and space, would be sucked into the mainstream politics. I mean, I have already talked about the difference between riot and pogrom. So, Hasan Azizul Haq's article Kromagato Attokhondan or constant degeneration of self observes the difference between the two, and the violence that is naturalized at the level of everyday language without even our understanding. We keep spewing hatred through ordinary through our everyday parlance, the way of referring to the other. Riots are more spontaneous, however, the pogroms that are organized are calculated, they are backed with a lot of money, so sponsorship is involved, and so there are hired, in most of these cases we see that there are hired goons sent by political party leaders to actually rummage these localized existences. Most of the times these existences are syncretic. So, and the chaos engendered by riots are used for fulfilling one's personal motives. However, these pogroms that are calculated, that are not at all off the cuff, they are not something that are unprecedented, are given religious, caste, class and ethnic meanings. So, Mushirul Hasan talks about the ethnic and sectarian strife combined with deep seated regional and linguistic cleavage, which reveal the limits of an agenda of the imaginary nationhood. At the heart of forming separate nations, especially in the wake of the British leaving the subcontinent, and how the subcontinent was partitioned into different post-colonial nation states. At the heart of this entire chapter, assertion of differential identities at different levels, and assertion of a theory that stated that people from different ethnicities, different cultural practices, communal or religious backgrounds cannot actually coexist in peace. A spate of films that were made at the turn of the century, Mammo and Train to Pakistan, Earth, Hey Ram, Gadar Ek Prem Katha, Pinjar, Veer Zara, all of which depict the trauma of partition in the domain of mainstream cinema. So, a large swath of the film audience would come from the refugee background, and so there was a strong emotional factor, an emotional element working in the audience psyche. So, the films in the mainstream cinema that used this topic of partition would enable the process of purgation, the process of identifying with what was happening on screen, and so through filmmaking and through the act of watching films, the modern Indian citizens, especially with refugee background, long to be part of or engage with this idea of the nation. Literary cultural representations that insert personal experiences are ways of reconstructing these fragmented histories that have not been told long after partition. So, they enable discussion of questions on violence, agency, and even explore the question of silence in the case of the people that have witnessed or that have survived physical or psychic brutalities at the time of partition. So, literary and cultural artifacts signal the elaboration of the personal. The personal axis is on the fore, which actually do not oppose with the historian's project, but add to it. So the literary cultural explorations make a valuable contribution. They complement the historian's project of recovering alternative histories, and however partial or subjective they are important because of their human dimension. So, literary cultural texts make claims to authenticity or accuracy. So, in many cases, decades after the event of the partition, artworks engage in different strategies, different methods of remembering the past. So, they can be characterized as narratives of memory, which David Herzeberger identifies as fictions that evoke past time through subjective remembering, most often through first person narration. So, the presence of the narrator becomes very important. The specificity, so it is a kind of foisting of the mini narrative, the local narrative within the grand scheme of things. In the formal historiography, through stating of facts, the narrator is ubiquitous and yet invisible. Here we have the an embodied narrator, which becomes very important in the case of the artworks, the literary cultural texts. Thinking of the remnants from past, Marguerite Duran would say that photographs promote forgetting. It is a confirmation of death. And Marion Hirsch further says, she talks about the Holocaust photographs, how they are uniquely able to bring out the hovering relation between life and death, and suggests the desire, necessity and impossibility of mourning in the face of massive public trauma. So, now partition is discussed in the context of post memory. It is a term popularized by Hirsch, which reflects back on memory, revealing the entire category of post memory, a memory that comes post to remembrance, to the act of remembrance. The category reveals its own constructed existence, and the fact that it is mediated by the processes of narration and imagination and the constant slippages that are taking place. So, memory, post memory and photographs are some of the topics that subjects that are discussed in the context of partition. Fromer talks about the difference between documentary images and the importance of aesthetic. So, documentary images actually propagate violence according to Fromer. They uphold the victimizer as they have been. It is a verisimilitude with reality. However, aesthetic introduces the question of control, structure and thereby a distance from the real, a distance from which the entire incident could be seen in hindsight and there would still be a space for doubt. Recent scholarship in history, literature and cultural studies focus on the artistic and testimonial evidence of the lasting suffering partition has engendered, both in material terms and in terms of the psychic loss that people incurred. So, John Cleary says that partition narratives can be compared in terms of their effort to either advance the goal of complete separation or promote convergence and integration. So, while the narrative, the mainstream or the grand narrative of Indian independence, the glorious history actually sees partition as a kind of resolution, the social scientists and the literary scholars examine this entire event in terms of leading to greater complexities in human relationships, greater complexities in one's formation, in making and unmaking of oneself. So, I think I would like to stop here today and we could come back for another round of discussions. Thank you.